Have you ever wondered what would happen if all your plans collapsed in an instant? Imagine, you're confident of victory, certain of your brilliant maneuver, and then reality hits you square in the face, revealing you're caught in a trap of your own making. Have you ever felt like the whole world was against you, and every attempt only dragged you deeper into the mire? I know that feeling. I've been there. And today, we'll discuss how, even in the most hopeless situations, when it seems like everything is going wrong, a way out can still be found. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, let us know in the comments where you're watching us from. On November 7th, 1943, just before midnight on Bougainville Island, Japanese destroyers silently cut through the dark waters of Empress Augusta Bay. Aboard were nearly 500 soldiers of the 53rd Infantry Division, headed for what their commanders believed was the Americans' greatest vulnerability. The plan was textbook perfect. Slip behind enemy lines while the Marines slept, establish a perimeter, and crush the American beachhead in a devastating pincer attack. Major James Wilson received a radio message at his command post. Enemy forces had landed behind their positions. Everything in Japanese doctrine said this should work. Surprise, darkness, superior forces attacking from an unexpected direction. The Marines were supposed to panic, break, and be trapped between two forces with no retreat. But as the first Japanese soldiers pushed deeper into the dense jungle, they had no idea they were entering the most perfectly organized killing field in Marine Corps history. The Americans were not trapped at all. The radio crackled to life in Major James Wilson's command post at 00:15 on November 8th. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. Enemy barges had been spotted landing 3 miles behind the main marine perimeter near Coromocana Lagoon. Wilson set down his coffee and intently studied the tactical map spread across his field desk. Red pins marked the forward positions of the 3rd and 9th Marine Regiments. Blue arrows indicated anticipated Japanese approach routes. And now, he drew a new symbol behind their own lines. 500 Japanese soldiers from the 53rd and 54th Infantry Regiments of the 17th Division executed what their commanders believed was a masterful flanking maneuver. While Marine attention was focused on jungle approaches from the north and east, the destroyers slipped through the darkness and landed nearly half a battalion behind the Marines. The plan followed classic military doctrine. Establish a blocking position behind enemy lines, then attack from multiple directions to create confusion and break morale. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph McCaffrey burst into the tent, his uniform still bearing traces of the red clay that coated everything on Bougainville. "Major, we have confirmation from the 12th Marine Regiment. Artillery observers counted at least 12 barges, maybe 15. They're offloading fast." Wilson nodded, already calculating response times and fire missions. The Japanese had chosen their landing site well, a stretch of beach protected by coral reefs, which made approach difficult for larger vessels, but was ideal for the shallow draft barges they preferred for such operations. What the Japanese didn't know was that Marine Corps doctrine had significantly evolved from the static defenses they expected to encounter. The 3rd Marine Division had spent months perfecting integrated fire support systems capable of responding to threats from any direction within minutes. While Japanese planning assumed it would take Americans hours to redeploy artillery and coordinate a response, the Marines had already rehearsed scenarios just like this. Sergeant Herbert Thomas was checking his squad's positions along the inner perimeter when the first artillery shells began to fall on the beach. The 12th Marine Regiment opened fire with their 75mm howitzers, walking shells with devastating precision across the landing zone. Through his field glasses, Thomas watched as Japanese soldiers scrambled from the barges, some diving into the surf, others running for the tree line. The 90mm coastal guns of the 3rd Defense Battalion joined the bombardment, their heavier shells cratering the beach and setting 2 barges ablaze. The Japanese had expected to achieve tactical surprise, but their own intelligence had failed them completely. Marine listening posts had tracked the destroyer's movement for over an hour, and shore observers had spotted the barges long before they reached the beach. By the time the first Japanese soldier stepped onto the sand, pre-planned artillery concentrations were already raining down on assigned target zones. What was intended as a coordinated assault devolved into a desperate fight for survival under a torrent of fire. Captain Isamu Akamatsu led the first wave of Japanese infantry deeper onto the island, his men moving in small groups through the dense jungle vegetation. They had trained for months in night operations and jungle warfare, confident in their ability to outmaneuver the Americans in rugged terrain. But as they pushed deeper towards their objectives, they began encountering something unexpected. Marine positions that seemed to know exactly where they were coming from. Machine gun nests, positioned to cover likely approach routes, artillery observers with direct lines to gun batteries, and illumination flares that lit up entire sections of the jungle at precisely the wrong moments. Private First Class Robert Carter manned an M1919 .30 caliber machine gun when the first Japanese patrol stumbled into his sector of fire. The Marines had established interlocking fields of fire that created kill zones at every natural choke point between the beach and their main positions. Carter's machine gun position, dug in behind a fallen log and camouflaged with jungle vegetation, commanded a narrow trail that Japanese scouts had identified as their primary infiltration route. When the lead elements came into his sights, Carter held his fire until the entire patrol was within the kill zone, then opened up with controlled bursts that scythed down the front rank and scattered the survivors. The Japanese assault began to unravel within the first hour. Units that were supposed to advance in coordination found themselves pinned down by accurate machine gun fire, or shattered by artillery concentrations that seemed to anticipate their every move. Radio communication between Japanese elements became sporadic as American jammers interfered with their frequencies. While American coordination remained flawless thanks to superior communication equipment and established protocols, Wilson monitored the battle from his command post, receiving constant updates from forward observers and artillery spotters. Imagine a night when all your meticulously crafted plans crumble, and the enemy you expected to encounter proves elusive and deadly. When every attempt to outflank the opponent only leads to a deeper, inescapable trap. What? How? Doesn't this resonate with us when we face something completely unexpected, when our familiar notions of reality are shattered? We've all been in situations where it seemed there was no way out, that we were outmaneuvered, that the enemy's superiority was undeniable. But the story we'll tell today demonstrates how, even in pitch darkness and chaos, one can not only endure, but also crush superior enemy forces, turning their own weapons, surprise, and night attack against them. You might think you know what night combat looks like, but this episode will show you something entirely different, exposing gaps in the conventional understanding of modern warfare. Forget everything you've been taught about the advantage of a surprise attack under the cover of darkness. Here, that doctrine led to the attacker's complete collapse. In this narrative, we'll examine the key tactical techniques that allowed the U.S. Marine Corps to turn a seeming disaster into a triumph, and show how these principles remain relevant today. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription, and of course let us know in the comments where you're watching us from. The Japanese attack unfolded precisely according to Marine defense doctrine. Confusion generated by darkness, unit dispersion due to complex terrain, and increasing casualties among officers who were forced to expose themselves trying to maintain control. The Americans, anticipating enemy actions, managed to turn the Japanese attempt at surprise into their own advantage, using superior firepower and established communications to methodically destroy the landing forces. Sergeant Thomas led his squad in a counterattack that would later earn him the Medal of Honor. Moving through terrain illuminated by flare bursts and machine gun tracers, he coordinated with adjacent units to encircle the remaining Japanese positions. His calm and decisive command under fire became legendary among the Marines who fought with him that night. When a Japanese grenade fragment pierced his left arm, Thomas continued to direct fire from an exposed position, refusing medical aid until the immediate threat was neutralized. This story of resilience and flawless coordination is just one example of how American forces were able to turn the tide, which we will elaborate on further. By 04:04 a.m., the Japanese rear attack had completely collapsed. What began as a meticulously planned flanking maneuver turned into a one-sided slaughter. The landing forces, intended to trap the Marines in a pincer, found themselves caught instead, squeezed between the landing beach and impenetrable Marine positions. Artillery continued to pound withdrawal routes, while Marine infantry methodically eliminated scattered survivors. The night that was meant to break American morale instead showcased the overwhelming superiority of Marine Corps combined arms warfare. Dawn would reveal the true scale of the disaster born from Japanese overconfidence. But how exactly did the Marine Corps achieve such absolute dominance? Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, let us know in the comments where you're watching us from. Japanese soldiers who survived the initial artillery barrage found themselves in a tactical nightmare they were never trained for. Captain Akamatsu's remaining men were scattered for nearly 2 miles through the jungle, cut off from their landing craft and facing Marine positions that seemed to anticipate their every move. The convenient assumptions that guided Japanese planning, that Americans fought predictably, that their fire support took time to coordinate, that darkness would provide cover, shattered against the reality of modern Marine Corps warfare. This failure to adapt proved to be their fatal flaw. Sergeant Thomas moved through the pre-dawn darkness with the fluid precision of a veteran who had learned to read the terrain like a map. His squad took up positions along a ridge that dominated the approaches to the main Marine perimeter, their M1919 machine guns positioned to create overlapping fields of fire across the valley below. When Japanese infiltrators attempted to flank his position using a stream bed, Thomas ordered precise bursts that drove them back into the open, where artillery observers could call in fire with deadly accuracy. This example demonstrates not just the ability to fight, but a deep understanding of tactics, which was a key differentiator. The Japanese expected to encounter the type of static defense they had met earlier in the Pacific Theater, isolated strong points that could be bypassed and overwhelmed by a concentrated assault. Instead, they found themselves confronting a defensive system that functioned as a single organism. When one Marine position engaged targets, adjacent units automatically adjusted their fields of fire to prevent enemy withdrawal. Artillery rained down on predetermined coordinates within minutes of a request. Communication between units remained constant despite the chaos of night combat. But who was behind this flawless coordination? Major Wilson coordinated the Marine response from his command post, with the calm efficiency of an officer who had studied every aspect of defensive warfare. His field phone directly linked him to artillery batteries, mortar sections, and forward observers positioned throughout the perimeter. When reports came in of Japanese movement in Grid Square 174, Wilson already had firing data prepared for that location. When observers spotted enemy forces attempting to establish a firing base, pre-planned artillery concentrations rained down on their positions within 3 minutes. This demonstrated that Japanese tactics were obsolete. The Japanese discovered their own tactical doctrine had become obsolete overnight. The small unit infiltration tactics that had worked against Chinese forces and earlier American positions in the Pacific proved useless against Marines who had learned to fight as integrated combined arms teams. Every rifle squad was supported by machine guns positioned for mutual support. Every company had direct communication with artillery batteries that could deliver precise fire on targets across the battle area. Every battalion had pre-registered fire missions covering probable enemy approach paths. And here's what that looked like in action. Private Carter's machine gun position became the focal point of a Japanese assault when Akamatsu led a desperate charge against what he believed was an isolated American strongpoint. The captain had gathered nearly 40 survivors from his scattered landing force, planning to overwhelm the Marines with numerical superiority and close-quarters combat. But Carter's gun was part of a meticulously planned defensive network that included overlapping fields of fire from 3 adjacent positions and direct support from a mortar section located 800 yards to the rear. As the Japanese attack commenced, Carter held his fire until the attackers were within 50 yards, then unleashed a torrent of fire that scythed down the lead elements and forced the survivors to take cover in a depression that had been pre-registered as Target Reference Point 7. Within 30 seconds of Carter's initial burst, mortar rounds rained down with deadly accuracy into that depression. The assault, which was supposed to break the American lines, instead resulted in 23 Japanese casualties and the virtual destruction of Akamatsu's remaining command structure. The battle demonstrated the revolutionary impact of radio communication on small unit tactics. While Japanese units struggled to maintain contact using signal flags and runners, who easily became targets for Marine snipers, American forces maintained constant communication via SCR-300 radios, which directly linked squad leaders to their company commanders. When Thomas reported enemy movement in his sector, supporting units were already adjusting their positions before the Japanese reached their attack points. When artillery observers requested fire missions, batteries responded within minutes, not hours, as had been required in earlier wars. This technological disparity multiplied by superior tactics, became the decisive factor in this night battle. Have you ever felt like you're giving it your all, but your efforts crash against an invisible wall? That old time-tested methods no longer work, and familiar strategies only lead to new defeats. We've all been in such situations where it seemed impossible to win, when circumstances dictated their ruthless rules. But imagine a battlefield where one side, relying on outdated dogmas, confronted a reality that overturned all perceptions of war. Forget the valor of a desperate charge. Forget the glory of a bayonet attack. This battle proved that courage alone is not enough against a new kind of war, a war of intellect and technology. In this video, we'll reveal how just a few tactical innovations change the course of an entire battle, demonstrating that even the most desperate resistance can be broken, not by brute force, but by intellectual superiority. As we delve into the details of this astonishing confrontation, don't forget to stay with us until the very end, as what you learn might completely change your perception of military strategy. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription, and please let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. Night, once a faithful ally to Japanese forces, became a deadly trap for them. Their night combat tactics, honed in clashes with less well-equipped adversaries, proved powerless against American Marines, who possessed advanced night vision devices and flawlessly coordinated fire support. Stealth infiltration routes, intended to ensure undetected movement, instead led directly into pre-designated kill zones. Assault positions that seemed tactically advantageous were, in reality, targeted by multiple marine weapons systems. The darkness, which should have concealed the Japanese movements, instead concealed the defending Marines, who knew every inch of their defensive sector. The artillery of the 12th Marine Regiment, equipped with 75mm howitzers, fired over 400 rounds during 6 hours of combat. Each round was meticulously aimed at targets continuously identified by forward observers, who maintained visual contact with Japanese units throughout the night. The 90mm coastal guns also contributed to this destructive effort. Their shells left massive craters, wiping out entire Japanese squads. By 3 a.m., Japanese return fire had diminished to sporadic rifle shots from scattered survivors, who were running low on ammunition and had lost contact with their command structure. At this point, Sergeant Thomas led his squad in a series of limited counterattacks, designed to eliminate remaining Japanese positions without exposing his men to unnecessary casualties. His tactical decisions reflected the new Marine Corps doctrine, which emphasized firepower over maneuver, using superior weaponry and communication to utterly destroy enemy forces rather than simply pushing them out of positions. When his squad encountered a Japanese machine gun nest still capable of effective fire, Thomas called in precise artillery strikes that eliminated the position without the need for a costly frontal assault. The Japanese landing force, numbering nearly 500 men at midnight, was reduced to fewer than 100 combat-effective fighters by dawn. The survivors found themselves trapped between the beach, where their landing craft had been destroyed by artillery fire, and the Marine positions, which formed an impenetrable barrier to their retreat. The rear attack, intended to break American resistance, instead vividly demonstrated the futility of traditional tactics against modern combined arms warfare. As the sun rose over Bougainville, the scale of the Japanese tactical disaster became evident to both sides. Dawn revealed the full extent of the calamity that had befallen Japan's 53rd Infantry Regiment. Bodies lay scattered across the jungle floor, a grotesque testament to the lethality of modern American firepower. Captain Akamatsu's corpse was found 50 yards from Private Carter's machine gun position, his sword still clutched firmly in hand. His final charge had brought him within sight of the Marine lines, before accurate rifle fire cut him down. The beach, where 500 soldiers had landed 12 hours earlier, was now a graveyard of twisted metal and abandoned equipment, with the charred hulks of landing barges, marking the high point of Japanese ambition. Major Wilson walked the battlefield as the morning light filtered through the jungle canopy, surveying the results of what military historians would later call a perfect defensive battle. His Marines had lost 17 killed and 32 wounded, casualties that were remarkably light, given the ferocity of the night's fighting. Japanese losses were catastrophic by any measure. Intelligence officers counted 237 confirmed enemy dead, with bloodstains and drag marks indicating that many more soldiers had been killed or wounded, but carried away by their comrades during the chaotic retreat. The tactical lessons gleaned from this encounter were as clear as they were revolutionary. Traditional infantry assault tactics, honed over decades of conflicts in China and Southeast Asia, proved utterly inadequate against an adversary equipped with modern communications, coordinated artillery support, and integrated defensive systems. The Japanese had planned their attack based on assumptions that were already obsolete, expecting to face the static, poorly coordinated defenses they had encountered in earlier Pacific campaigns. Sergeant Thomas, despite his own injuries, shrapnel cuts to his left arm, and a bullet grazed to his shoulder, bandaged by medics working with calm efficiency, oversaw the evacuation of wounded Marines while his squad secured the perimeter around the aid station. He refused evacuation, insisting his men needed leadership more than he needed medical attention. His actions during the battle would earn him the Medal of Honor, but even the citation could hardly convey the tactical genius he displayed in coordinating fire and managing his squad's actions in response to numerous Japanese thrusts. The surviving Japanese soldiers found themselves in an impossible tactical situation as daylight exposed their positions to Marine observation. Small groups found refuge in coral caves and dense jungle vegetation, but their isolation was complete. There was no radio contact with higher command, no possibility of resupply or reinforcement, and no viable escape route that was not covered by American weapons. Lieutenant General Imamura's grand strategy had collapsed, devolving into a desperate struggle for individual survival among the scattered remnants of what was once an elite infantry battalion. Marine patrols began systematic clearings of the battle area, employing tactics that reflected the hard-won experience of jungle warfare in the Pacific. Instead of advancing in traditional formations that could be lured into ambushes or directed into killing zones, they moved in small groups with constant radio communication and immediate access to artillery support. When Japanese survivors opened fire from concealed positions, the Marines responded with overwhelming firepower rather than costly attempts to dislodge them in close quarters combat. The M2 50 caliber machine guns, positioned to cover the approaches to the beach, proved devastatingly effective against Japanese attempts to occupy defensive positions in the coral outcroppings. The heavy rounds could penetrate cover that offered protection against rifle fire, and the psychological impact of the weapon was immense. Japanese soldiers, who had withstood artillery barrages and mortar fire, often broke and scattered when the distinctive sound of the 50 caliber machine guns began to tear through their positions. Do you think success in any endeavor is always the result of unparalleled individual bravery or overwhelming numerical superiority? What if I told you that true victory is often born from something entirely different, from impeccable coordination, thoughtful strategy, and an invisible force capable of breaking even the most resilient adversary? This, in fact, was the key to a triumph that changed the course of one of the bloodiest wars. We all face moments when superior forces seem to leave no chance, when our usual methods fail and despair closes in. But the story we will uncover today will show how a systematic approach and unprecedented cohesion can turn a seemingly hopeless situation into a crushing defeat for the enemy. This is not just a battle narrative, it's a lesson on how to rethink your capabilities and change the rules of the game. In this account, we will learn about the 3 principles that made the American defense on Bougainville not just successful, but truly exemplary. And here is the first of them. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, please let us know where you're watching from in the comments. With the first rays of dawn, as darkness gradually receded, forward artillery observers called in fire on designated targets, with precision honed by months of training and combat experience. It was a deadly symphony of destruction. When Marine patrols encountered resistance, they did not rush into costly frontal assaults, but skillfully withdrew to a safe distance, requesting artillery support. The result of this approach was the methodical destruction of Japanese positions, minimizing American casualties while maximizing damage to the enemy. Private Carter's machine gun team, providing covering fire, advanced, preparing for the final sweep. Their M1919 was repositioned to cover new sectors of fire as the Marines expanded their control over the battlefield. Overnight, Carter had fired over 800 rounds, changing barrels with mechanical precision despite the chaos of battle. The bodies of Japanese soldiers, scattered around his original position, served as a silent testament to the deadly effectiveness of properly employed automatic weapons in defensive operations. The psychological impact of this engagement extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, please let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Japanese survivors, captured or surrendered, reported complete demoralization within their units. Many soldiers expressed deep distrust of the speed and accuracy of American fire support. The coordinated response that crushed their attack challenged fundamental assumptions about American military capabilities and morale that had guided Japanese strategy throughout the Pacific War. The Marine Corps doctrine, emphasizing integrated combined arms warfare, proved its superiority over traditional infantry tactics in the most decisive and convincing manner. The Japanese landing party was annihilated not by numerical superiority or individual heroism, but by the systematic application of firepower, flawless communication, and tactical coordination. Every element of the Marine defensive system functioned exactly as intended. from the initial detection and tracking of enemy forces to the final elimination of scattered survivors. By noon on November 8th, organized Japanese resistance had completely ceased. The few remaining survivors on the battlefield were isolated individuals or small groups without weapons, equipment, or command. Marine patrols continued their clearings throughout the day, but the battle was essentially over. Lieutenant General Imamura's attempt to trap the American beachhead in a pincer movement resulted in the complete destruction of almost an entire battalion of his best troops. Major Wilson compiled his post-operational report with satisfaction, though he was aware that similar battles still lay ahead as American forces pushed deeper into Japanese-held territory. The tactical innovations demonstrated on Bougainville would become standard doctrine for Marine operations throughout the remainder of the Pacific War. The night that was meant to mark the beginning of an American defeat instead revealed the overwhelming superiority of modern combined arms warfare over traditional infantry tactics. The methodical elimination of surviving Japanese soldiers continued on November 9th and 10. This grim process demonstrated both the thoroughness of Marine operations and the hopelessness of the enemy's situation. M1917 light tanks from the 3rd Tank Battalion joined the final clearings, their 37mm guns and machine guns providing devastating firepower against Japanese positions that had been bypassed during the night fighting. The tanks moved through the jungle with surprising agility, their crews experienced in methods of direct support for infantry operations in dense terrain, allowing them to effectively handle their tasks. Sergeant Thomas led his squad in a systematic clearing of coral caves where Japanese soldiers had taken refuge. These natural fortifications provided excellent protection against small arms and artillery fragments, but they became deadly traps when Marines used flamethrowers and explosive charges to destroy those entrenched inside. Thomas coordinated with combat engineers who set shaped charges at cave entrances, collapsing tunnels, and sealing occupants within. The work was dangerous and grueling, requiring meticulous coordination to prevent friendly fire incidents as multiple units operated in close proximity. Aircraft from the 7th Fighter Squadron provided close air support throughout the final phase, their pilots experienced in the precise targeting required for jungle warfare. Corsair fighters carried 500-pound bombs and rockets, which were devastatingly effective against Japanese positions that remained hidden from ground observation. When Marine patrols marked targets with colored smoke grenades, aircraft could drop ordnance within 50 yards of friendly positions, a level of accuracy that would have been impossible in earlier stages of the war. Major Wilson established his forward command post at a captured Japanese position, examining equipment and documents that revealed the extent of the enemy's planning for the failed operation. Maps showed detailed intelligence on Marine positions, communication networks, and supply routes. Equipment inventories indicated that the landing force was equipped for prolonged operations with ammunition and supplies sufficient for a week-long campaign. The Japanese had clearly expected their rear attack to succeed, planning to establish a permanent blocking position that would strangle American operations on Bougainville. This flow of intelligence provided valuable insights into Japanese tactical doctrine and planning methods. Documents captured from Captain Akamatsu's command group showed that enemy commanders had seriously underestimated American defensive capabilities, expecting to encounter the isolated strongpoints that characterized earlier Pacific battles. Japanese planning assumed that American artillery would be slow to react and inaccurate in night conditions, and that American units would be unable to coordinate effective counterattacks in the dark. What could be worse than facing an invisible enemy, when every rustle in the jungle portends danger? Have you ever felt trapped, as if all your efforts are futile, and a threat lurks at any moment? Perhaps you are making the very mistake that prevents you from seeing a way out of such a situation. Today, we will uncover a secret that will revolutionize your understanding of how to combat chaos and uncertainty. Forget everything you've been told about survival tactics. The truth runs much deeper, and it manifested itself in one of the most brutal battles of the Pacific War. This is a story of how, in the darkest night, when all hope seemed lost, American Marines were able not only to hold their ground, but also to achieve a crushing victory. In those days, when darkness was their primary adversary, Private Carter and his machine gun team became a crucial link in the final clearing operations. They provided cover, while other Marines advanced through areas where Japanese resistance might still be lurking. The psychological strain of the prolonged battle affected both sides, exhausting both the Americans and their adversaries. However, the unwavering discipline of the Marine Corps and impeccable logistical support allowed them to maintain combat effectiveness. At the same time, the surviving Japanese soldiers suffered from hunger, exhaustion, and complete isolation from their command, rendering their situation virtually hopeless. Stay with us and watch until the end, for there are many more astonishing discoveries ahead. We would be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to write in the comments where you are watching this video from. The few Japanese prisoners captured during the final operations became a valuable source of information regarding the enemy's morale and tactical effectiveness. Most testified that their units had lost all cohesion within the first hours of the battle. Broken communications and significant losses among officer ranks made coordinated resistance impossible. Many expressed genuine surprise at the speed and accuracy of American artillery, as they had been led to believe that Marine fire support was inferior to Japanese standards. This indicated a deep delusion and underestimation of the enemy, which ultimately led to their collapse. Marine casualties during these final clearings proved surprisingly low. Only 3 killed and 8 wounded over a 2-day period. Such a colossal disparity in losses eloquently spoke both to the exceptional effectiveness of American tactics and the complete breakdown of organized Japanese resistance. The surviving enemy soldiers were scattered, poorly equipped, and devoid of any leadership. At the same time, Marine units maintained full combat readiness thanks to continuous resupply and reinforcements arriving from the main beachhead. This asymmetry of forces and organization became the decisive factor that determined the outcome of the entire operation. The final count of Japanese casualties reached 377 confirmed dead. Moreover, total losses were estimated to be close to 400, accounting for those killed or wounded but carried away by surviving comrades. The landing force, numbering nearly 500 men at the start of the operation, was almost completely annihilated. Fewer than 20 were taken prisoner, and perhaps about 50 survivors managed to escape through the jungle to join other Japanese units. This was not merely a defeat, but the complete extermination of a combat unit, which dealt a severe blow to Japanese strategy. As Thomas's squad fortified defensive positions around the cleared battle area, he received news of his recommendation for the Medal of Honor. The citation specifically noted his leadership in combat and his pivotal role in coordinating the counterattacks that broke Japanese resistance. However, Thomas's comrades understood that his actions symbolized something much greater. They became a vivid example of the transformation of American military doctrine, from reliance on individual heroism to the systematic application of superior firepower and flawless coordination. This was not just an act of courage, but a demonstration of a new approach to warfare that changed the course of many subsequent battles. The strategic implications of this engagement extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation on Bougainville. Japanese commanders across the Pacific region would have to reconsider their perceptions of American military capabilities and combat effectiveness. The coordinated defensive response that shattered the 53rd Infantry Regiment conclusively demonstrated that Marine units could not be overcome by traditional infiltration and surprise attack tactics. This battle served as a wake-up call for the Japanese command, foreshadowing impending shifts in the balance of power. Major Wilson compiled detailed reports on the battle's progression, which significantly influenced Marine Corps doctrine throughout the remainder of the Pacific War. His analysis emphasized the critical importance of integrated fire support, reliable communication, and thorough preparation of defensive positions. The methods proven effective on Bougainville were subsequently refined and applied in later operations, contributing to a string of crushing defeats that ultimately forced Japan to surrender. Thus, the lessons learned from this battle became the foundation for future victories. The battlefield itself was transformed into a training ground where new Marine recruits could study the effectiveness of proper defensive tactics. The positions where Thomas led his counterattacks became reference points for small unit leadership training. The coral caves, where Japanese soldiers made their last stand, were used to demonstrate the correct application of flamethrowers and explosive charges in close-quarters combat. It was not merely a place of remembrance, but a living textbook, written in blood and victory. As November 10th drew to a close, the last organized Japanese resistance in the battle area was completely suppressed. The rear attack, which was intended to ensnare American forces in a crushing pincer movement, instead turned into a textbook demonstration of the superiority of modern combined arms warfare over traditional infantry tactics. Lieutenant General Imamura's strategy not only completely failed, but also cost him almost an entire battalion of seasoned troops, whose loss significantly impacted all subsequent operations. The night that began with Japanese confidence in their tactical superiority concluded with full confirmation of American military doctrine and the complete annihilation of the enemy forces that dared to challenge the Marine defensive positions. The morning of November 11th brought an unusual quiet to the Bougainville beachhead, as Marine units consolidated their positions and processed the lessons learned from the crushing defeat of the Japanese. Major Wilson stood on the ridge where Sergeant Thomas had performed his heroic act, surveying a battlefield transformed from dense jungle into a moonscape of shell craters and annihilated vegetation. The tactical implications of what had transpired here would influence military doctrine for years to come, but the immediate human cost demanded prompt recognition and profound reflection. Grave registration teams methodically worked across the battlefield, identifying and processing American casualties with the dignity and respect befitting their sacrifice. Each of the 17 Marines who fell in the battle was photographed and documented before burial in a temporary cemetery established near the beachhead. Their names were to be conveyed to their next of kin, along with letters explaining that they had died defending American positions against an overwhelming enemy assault. This was a tribute to those who gave their lives for victory. While the full details of their tactical victory remained classified for months, Thomas personally oversaw the construction of defensive fortifications designed to prevent any repeat Japanese infiltration attempts. His unit had learned invaluable lessons regarding the optimal placement of machine guns for maximum effectiveness in jungle environments. Techniques later incorporated into Marine Corps training manuals and disseminated to units across the Pacific Theater. The positions where his men fought so effectively were meticulously mapped and analyzed by intelligence officers eager to understand why American defensive doctrine had proven so superior to Japanese offensive tactics. This battle was not merely a victory, but a defining moment that altered the course of the war. What if I told you that even the bravest soldier outnumbering the enemy is doomed to defeat if their tactics are outdated? Perhaps you've always believed that in war, victory goes to the side with more soldiers or higher morale. But history has shown that this is only part of the truth, and sometimes the decisive factor is something entirely different. Many military analysts ignored this critical moment for decades, failing to realize how the foundation of modern warfare was laid right here. Forget everything you've been told about Japanese night attacks being an unstoppable force. At Bougainville, that legend wasn't just disproven. It was obliterated, demonstrating that the old rules no longer applied. In this video, we will reveal how, in just one night on the Pacific island of Bougainville, American Marines overturned the perception of night assaults, demonstrating principles that saved thousands of lives and changed the course of the entire war. The psychological impact of that night's engagement permeated the military hierarchies of both sides, shaping strategy throughout the remainder of the Pacific campaign. Japanese commanders, receiving reports of the disaster, struggled to comprehend how an elite infantry battalion could be virtually annihilated in a single night by defending forces outnumbered by the attackers. The coordinated firepower and tactical flexibility demonstrated by the Marine units challenged fundamental assumptions about the effectiveness of American armed forces that Japanese command had held since Pearl Harbor. Stay with us and watch until the end. We would be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Such astonishing results were possible due to unprecedented cohesion. Private Carter's machine gun, for instance, was credited with over 60 confirmed enemy casualties, making his position one of the deadliest single firing points of the entire engagement. Military historians later meticulously studied the precise placement of his weapon and the fields of fire he commanded, recognizing that his tactical situation represented an ideal application of automatic weapons in defensive operations. The interlocking fire he coordinated with adjacent positions became a textbook example of how well-placed machine guns could dominate terrain and funnel enemy movement into predetermined kill zones. We greatly appreciate your support, so please stay with us and watch this video until the end. Don't forget to like subscribe to the channel, and definitely let us know in the comments which city or country you're watching from. Your engagement helps us create more interesting content. Intelligence decryption of captured Japanese documents revealed the true scale of the enemy's miscalculation that led to such a devastating defeat. Planning documents indicated that Japanese commanders expected to encounter static, defensive positions manned by troops with limited night combat capabilities and minimal artillery support. Their tactical doctrine presumed that American units would require hours to coordinate counterattacks, and that individual Marine positions could be overwhelmed by a concentrated assault before supporting firepower was brought to bear. The reality they faced was devastatingly different, fundamentally diverging from their expectations. The true state of affairs was that Marine defensive doctrine emphasized mobile defense with integrated fire support, capable of responding to threats in minutes, not hours. Communication systems linking every rifle squad to battalion-level fire support meant that isolated Japanese assault teams were almost instantly subjected to precise artillery fire upon detection. Night vision equipment and coordinated illumination allowed Marine defenders to engage targets that believed themselves hidden by darkness, stripping the enemy of night's primary advantage. Lieutenant Wilson was ordered to prepare detailed after-action reports for dissemination among Marine units across the Pacific, with a particular focus on the tactical innovations that proved most effective against Japanese night attack methods. His analysis subsequently influenced defensive doctrine at Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and other critical battles where American forces faced similar infiltration attempts. The methods developed during the Bougainville engagement would save thousands of American lives in subsequent operations, becoming a clear testament to the power of adaptation. The strategic repercussions of Lieutenant General Imamura's failed operation extended beyond the immediate tactical situation, influencing Japanese planning throughout the theater. The loss of nearly an entire battalion of veteran troops represented a significant depletion of Japanese combat power on Bougainville. However, the psychological impact proved even more devastating. Word of the catastrophe spread among Japanese units, eroding their confidence in traditional tactics and command decisions, sowing doubt about the infallibility of previous strategies. Even amidst the fierce confrontation, medical personnel on both sides demonstrated professional competence, adhering to the highest standards of military medicine. American wounded were immediately evacuated to field hospitals equipped with the latest surgical techniques and pharmaceuticals. Salvageable Japanese wounded were provided medical care often superior to what their own forces could provide, although many succumbed to injuries that might have been treatable with quicker intervention. This highlighted not only a tactical but also a humanitarian superiority. Thomas was officially recommended for the Medal of Honor by his battalion commander, who cited his exceptional leadership under fire and his role in coordinating the defensive actions that broke the Japanese resistance. The recommendation included detailed testimonies from Marines who fought alongside him, describing how his calm presence and tactical expertise were crucial to the successful defense. The medal would be presented 6 months later in a ceremony that honored not only individual heroism but also the collective excellence of Marine Corps training and doctrine, demonstrating that success is a result not only of personal valor but also systemic preparation. The final casualty count confirmed the completeness of the American tactical victory, on a scale that would have been unthinkable at the outset of the Pacific War. 377 confirmed Japanese dead against 17 American casualties represented an exchange ratio demonstrating the overwhelming superiority of modern combined arms warfare over traditional infantry assault tactics. This disparity reflected not merely superiority in weaponry and equipment, but fundamental differences in tactical doctrine, training methods, and operational coordination, signaling a paradigm shift in warfare. A reconstruction of Japanese planning indicated that enemy commanders had expected their rear attack to achieve tactical surprise and cause panic among the Marine defenders, leading to a collapse of American resistance and the recapture of key positions around the beachhead. Instead, their assault triggered a perfectly coordinated defensive response that systematically annihilated their forces while inflicting minimal casualties on the defenders. This battle became a textbook example of how superior doctrine and training could overcome numerical superiority and tactical surprise, rewriting the rules of warfare. The lessons learned at Bougainville influenced American military operations for decades after World War II, establishing principles of integrated fire support and coordinated defense that became fundamental elements of modern warfare. The night Japanese commanders thought they had trapped Marine forces instead became the moment traditional infantry tactics confronted their obsolescence in the face of an emerging combined arms doctrine that would dominate battlefields for generations to come.